I hate to be expanding this canvas even more broadly, but in much of your previous work, you've had a lot to say about national security. Can you make some links between your concerns around national security and pandemic ethics?
So one of the items I've been thinking about for the last few weeks is the way that we in the US at least, and maybe this can help to tee off an exchange with Ulf, consider that what falls in the category of a quote unquote natural disaster. Natural disasters in our system at least are physical in nature. Hurricanes, floods, tsunamis, earthquakes. Um, Interestingly, that biological disasters are not considered in our regulatory scheme, in our government scheme, to be natural disasters. And yet I think it's very clear that this is one. And it's very clear that it does have national security implications. In the early weeks of the pandemic, the US military made a number of adjustments that are not well publicized, but one that was identified in March was a decision by the US Army not to let people cycle out on schedule, but and not to move them around to new deployments because you don't want to move the bodies around if you can avoid it. And so, and messages were sent. I think we can be assured to our adversaries, the U.S. adversaries, that we were still focused on the work of defending the nation. So there's no question, but that we need, I think, to take another look at the way in which we integrate worries about public health into our national security system. Now, there's a very powerful objection to that from many political scientists, which is, oh, great, let's just extend the reach of the state now. This is called securitization into everything. And let's use a pandemic as an excuse to do that. This is, by the way, part of I would say, the more thoughtful objections to some of the prescriptions of public health officials in this country, at least, and worries about moving into a surveillance state. But I want to say one other thing that I think everybody also has alluded to, and it's going to give me a little excuse to get into this, and maybe again a kind of transatlantic conversation as well. Um, the fact that the leading government public health official, Dr. Fauci, has played such a bizarre, iconic role in this situation. This is somebody I've known somewhat for decades. Um, I think there's a deeper analysis to be done, and if you'll forgive me, public health and politics can't be disentangled. They're both about bodies and how bodies interact, right? So in the U.S. system and our political system, our two political parties, like all parties, are coalitions, and in the Republican Party, the coalition between business-oriented, commerce-oriented internationalists and social conservatives had held together quite well, partly because of the fact that Ronald Reagan somehow seemed to satisfy both veins in the party. This, I think, began to change with the end of the Cold War, when there wasn't a common enemy to unite those veins of the party, an anti-communist orientation. And you see people like Pat Buchanan and Ann Coulter beginning to appeal to the populist vein. Now, Nita alluded to the anti-science sentiment or the skepticism of science, and she says, I've written about this. If you think about it, the conservative movement, the far right conservative movement in this country, right populism, there's also left populism, right, in terms of anti-vaccination, but right populism, which is particularly on our minds right now, is a reaction to elites. And so you think about, let's face it, academics tend to be on the left. Um, the entertainment industry tends to be on the left in terms of cultural orientation. Um, Technology tends to be on the left, or maybe those people are libertarians, hard to tell. Um, and and science is seen as an elite institution. Much of it takes place at our elite institutions, the universities in the US and in Europe. So I think that part of the breakdown that we've seen in the last year has been kind of tearing off the Band-Aid of something that has been festering for a while. Uh, an emerging populism of the right that is skeptical about elite institutions, that feels left out, that doesn't trust the values that are being transmitted by professors like us to the sons and daughters of America's parents. Um, that I think has manifested itself a little differently in Europe than it has here. But I think it's essential to understand that this is a several decade old shift, and it's in the nature of the political coalitions that we call our parties.